was in the process of doing the wiring for this manual conversion, and I noticed a bunch of R series house insulation tucked back in here. This is behind the passenger seat, above the rear shelf, or underneath the rear shelf cover, and it tucked all the way back under the speaker, and it was piled all the way up. So in the process, we discovered that there's a bunch of chewed up wires, and even the seatbelt retractor has some chew marks on it. So it was a mouse that made its little cozy winter home in here at a point in time. I haven't seen any other remnants of it in here, but we want to go through this harness because there are quite a few frayed wires in here. Always do this with the battery still connected. That way, if you touch wires like 12 volt to ground, you'll get a spark, so you'll know that it. No, I'm just kidding. Always disconnect the battery when you're working on this stuff, 100%. We're just gonna clip these zip ties here. Just be real careful when you're doing this that you don't actually get the wire in it when you do it. We're just doing this to get a better look at this loom. This is the main wiring loom for the engine bay harness. So this runs all the communications that are interior to the engine bay. So we don't want to mess with this. This is a very important harness. Now I did notice up here just one wire, just looking at it with the magnet, just this white wire hanging down has a little bit of a frayed spot on it. So before I fully pull this out, it's literally just a tiny little nick. I don't know if you can see it, but I mean it's like 2 millimeters maybe, tiniest little nick. In fact, this piece right here will push down over it, and that's the only thing I see on that whole section of the loom. So before I pull this whole thing out, I'm gonna go ahead and repair that. And for something small like this, it doesn't really make sense to try to go crazy and pull the wire. I mean, to try to pull that wire out of the loom is gonna be a complete nightmare. So I'm just going to use a tiny little dab of liquid tape just to protect it. This probably isn't even necessary since it's the only wire that is exposed in here, but this will kind of pack inside there just to protect it from any elements or any grounding, anything that it could make contact with potentially. Now that that is covered, we're going to just pull it out just a touch, and then we're going to wrap that up with some Tessa tape, which is the same tape that the factory uses for this stuff. Alright, so that's just a quick and easy fix up there. Alright, so now we want to look at the rest of this harness. Alright, another thing. Oh, this could. Yeah, I'm going to make a suggestion that he get these re-webbed because that's. Doesn't feel like a mouse chew. It feels like it's burned hard. It's coarse, like it got burned. But either way, it's any compromise to a seatbelt. And plus, this guy with the livery wrap that he has on here, he probably would take advantage of the opportunity to do something custom, maybe some red seatbelts or black with red stripes, or I don't know, something. There's a lot of options, but I use Seatbelt Planet for my seatbelts, but there's a lot of options out there. All right, so one of these is reusable. 2 of them are not, so I'll have to find replacements for these. They sit on these little coarse thread screws. They just screw on, and the reusable kind I can just slide a new zip tie into this and strap that back up, but we need to replace this with a good unit. So all right, so this is what we want to see. We want to look at every piece of the section of the loom that's exposed. I don't see anything up here. I don't see anything down there. Looks like everything's pretty much contained to this area right here. So we're just gonna remove this tape. This stuff tears pretty easily, so you can just kind of. Now I'm gonna grab a paint pen in a second, but we want to mark the most compromised wires. This is one of them right here. Technically, I don't see any actually broken pieces on this wire. It looks like the entire wire is intact, but unfortunately I don't have any way to reconnect this wire to slide a piece of insulation over it. I don't have any way to reattach it, so we're gonna cut it and we're gonna splice it back together. we're gonna slide some heat shrink tubing over it. So there's one right there, one right here. This is a twisted pair right here, and it's got multiple breaks. It's got one on the yellow here. This is a twisted trio, actually. There's 3 wires here. So there's one right here. That's not the worst compromise I see. Little tiny nick right there. Another small nick right here. One here. Yeah, you must have been getting a nice buzz off of that loom right there, because that's the majority of it right there. Tapping into the 12 volt and grounding his little feet. Nice little party back here. All right, these are good if you're just doing like speaker wiring and stuff like that, but if you want to make it look OEM, you really want to use something that the factory would use. So here's what we're going to do. Since we're not actually missing any wire off of this, none of these wires were actually broken, meaning that we still have, this ought to be either 7 or 9 strands. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so this is a 7 strand. This is going to be like a 22 gauge wire. And they're all there and they're all intact. So what we're going to do is, since we actually have a little bit of extra length on this one will work out really nicely, or we can fix this up. So you want to just separate all these out, pull the sheathing from the wire all the way off. We're just separating these wires. I'm going to count them, make sure they're all there. 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 7 wires there, which is what this should be. Twist this up real good. A little bit extra length than what we need, but if we were just doing this from scratch, but we're gonna leave it. And I'm gonna actually put a longer piece than usual of the heat shrink tubing on this. Now we're gonna just slide this 10 butt connector all the way past up the sheath, and then we're gonna slip it over the other one. Careful not to let it slip out before you start to tighten it, and we're just gonna some nice firm crimps. So now we have a nice solid repair, just like the factory would do. Slide our tubing over, and most places, most of the time you would have a heat gun with a nozzle on it that would get in here and get it really good, but I'm old school. You don't want to overdo it. You just want to, for these marine shrink ones, you just want to do it till you start to see the glue pop out the side. And this being a smaller gauge, it doesn't take long for that to happen. All right, so we got one of our wire repairs right there. All right, let's move on to the next one. Now this one right here, this one's going to be a little bit tricky. We don't have this, don't have a huge amount of length on this one. So given that angle that it's coming from, we're going to cut this one right here. And then we're gonna pull it up over, and that's gonna give us the extra length that we need. All right, so same deal here. This one for sure wasn't frayed enough to be missing wires, but just to be 100%, we're gonna count them. Got 7 wires, everybody's happy. Now, this one has frays that go as far as right here. There's a really tiny nick in this, but we want to cover the whole thing. So we're going to cut a little bit longer of a piece of the heat shrink tubing just to protect that section so we don't have to cut it. Since we're taking advantage of the ability to have the extra protection right there, this ought to cover the whole thing. That's more than enough. All right, so we're gonna take off about, all right, and again, when you do it, anytime you do this, when you have these critical engine wires especially, you're gonna count your wires to make sure that we didn't just take off more than we should have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's not gonna work. So what we need to do is move a little bit further up. We go a little bit lighter on the, all right, see how we have the extra wires down there? 6, 7. So that's what we need out of this whole thing. So I'm gonna just take a razor blade, just ever so slightly shade the length that we need, pin this back. Sometimes it's better to do it by hand than to use a tool. Here's where our 2 that we're missing are, so we're just gonna snip this one close to the end there. Don't want our wires flying everywhere, so I'm gonna try to hang on to them here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Boom. All right, so we got what we need. Twist them up real good. We'll go ahead and slide our heat shrink tubing on there. All right, slide our butt connector. Now we got a nice firm crimp on there, and we're just gonna slide our insulation over. And that insulation is protecting our whole section of frayed wires. Now the next important section, the most obvious one that I see, is this twisted trio Now when you have a twisted set, I do see some chews on this right here, but I don't see anything exposed. Tiny little piece right there that's exposed. Now these are small enough that I'm gonna just hit them with the liquid tape and then tape them separately. They're not big enough to create a new problem, but we want to make sure that we didn't lose any strands of wires, because that is effectively going to lower our gauge thickness. Good tested tape is super sticky. Even sometimes if you do a section and you have to remove it, it's a pain because it's such a good firm fit. Okay, that's a good setup right there. All right, so I'm worried about this one, yellow one here. I'm worried about this brown one up here. We'll make sure that we maintain our twist section in there when we do it. But first, this one is broken further up the chain, or chewed into further up the chain. Right here, I'm just gonna run a piece of insulation heat shrink tubing up there. Cover that spot, because that is not deep enough to have broken a wire. It's just so a twisted set of wires. It's twisted because twisting does the same thing as shielding. If you ever see a wire that has a shield built into it, it's to filter out any communication noise that might be picked up from other wires that have other communications nearby. With this loom having so many wires, especially some of these, they're going to be sending out certain frequencies, and you want to eliminate these communication wires from picking up those frequencies. So in order to do that, by twisting these wires together, it eliminates it picking up other frequencies running through these wires. So it actually does pretty much the same thing as a insulated wire. It's a little trick to get away without having to insulate. If you have multiple wires that are running together for the same communication system, or in most cases this is going to be like a sensor or something along those lines that is sending detailed information. You want that to not be impeded by other things that it could mistake for information. So typically when you're doing a twisted wire set, it's twisted because it's running a certain length. Usually if it's like less than 2 feet, I don't know what the actual standard is, but it depends on the gauge and the location of the wire and what it's doing. But usually when you have a shielded wire like that, it's because it has to run a specific length on the car. All right, we've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. That one's clean. You don't want to play with these too much because you can break them. All right, there's our huckleberries. So this one doesn't have to be a super long one, and since we're dealing with a twisted set, we're gonna try to keep it a little bit shorter. You have a little break in the twist, it's not gonna impact your ability to for that wire to communicate. You don't want it to be too much of a break. Eliminate one of the twists because that's going to give us a little bit of extra length that we need to connect these. Even though we didn't really lose much length, we're having an overlap. These things are about 8 millimeters long, and so we need to have that 8 millimeter of overlap, which untwisting the wires just a little bit will give us that. So we get dual protection too because we're using marine heat shrink insulation. We're doubling up on our strength because this has the glue built in, and the glue is very strong. In fact, removing these things is a huge pain in the butt. You have to just cut them. We're gonna do the same type of fix on this brown one up here, which is already tight, so I'm gonna have to untwist it for sure. Not the most comfortable position, if I'm being honest. I don't see any other breaks on this one. I wanna be real gentle with this. These wires are pretty brittle. 5, 6, 7. Okie dokie. Just on this section here, we're gonna tape this whole thing up. Okay, that's it. Give it one more look over, make sure we're not missing anything. You can see where he started to chew in certain spots. I say he, but it's probably a gender neutral mouse. We're gonna make it look like it never happened. My favorite part. So a lot of times the factory will put, at least on these cars, they'll put a piece of blue, sometimes it's white, tape around the area where they want you to have a strap. That's how we know exactly where that strap goes. Twist these around so that people don't cut their fingers on them. That's it. That's our wire repair. I think he'll be happy not to have to worry about stuff going bad in here.